The world is slowly melting away. Memories are being forgotten. And soon, no one will remember the ways of Nostalgaia.
Yes, indeed. It is called Nostalgaia, where the— Wait! Cut! Was that your customization screen? Oh, almighty save me. I don't know what you are, but you're no hero. So, I'm not playing the intro.
Anyway, welcome to Nostalgaia. I played the PS5 physical version from Superware Games, and this does come with the Rise of Evil DLC built into the physical build. But if you play on PC, it is a separate purchase to get at adds 2 areas to the game, a few handful of bosses, and more lore and story about one of the NPCs if you dwell into the darkness a little bit more than it seems. But anyway, let's get into the setup of this game. So this is a Souls-like game, but not just a basic. Oh, it's a medieval Souls game. This, in my opinion, the interesting aspect of it is the story, the storytelling, the tale that's being weaved. I think that's the most unique thing about this game. While it is indeed a Souls-like, and it's pretty basic in most of the way it's being a Souls-like. There's not a whole lot of experimenting or doing its own kind of thing. It has a pretty basic type of weapons of swords and hammers and axes. You don't get like bows and crossbows and things. You have a bit of a limitation on the kind of goods that you would usually get in a lot of Souls-like. You do still have magic in the form of broken code, so those objects that have like corrupted coding and stuff that let you do all kinds of bizarro things, and that's basically this game's version of magic. It's kind of a middle ground between mana and what like the Dark Souls games do, where you have limited castings. But the difference is that enemies can drop the resource that you use to cast spells, so you can sometimes recover some of it while on your journey. So it's not as strict to how many castings you got like Dark Souls is, but it's not as abundant as like dumping orbs like in Demon Souls and just getting all the fucking mana you need right off the bat. One of the unique aspects to the game, like I said, is the story, in my opinion. The game is a game. The story is about a game. It's about a game called Nostalgaia, and it is falling apart. Its story of having heroes come and save the day is collapsing, and the world itself is degrading. Different things are simulating different eras of gaming. 3D objects, polygon objects, 2D objects, 16-bit objects, old pixelated twig stickmen, which is what you spawn into the world as. You spawn into Nostalgaia and you are the last hero. Nobody has spawned into the game in a long time, and you find the game is not welcoming to you at all. Something has happened in Nostalgaia, and their system of the hero's journey, as you would learn it as you go through the game, has fallen apart. And how the game worked and what the game did has changed. And as you go through the game to learn what has happened in Nostalgaia, and either choose to save or potentially just uproot whatever took over, you go through a journey to learn about Nostalgaia. Now, just like a lot of Souls games, a lot of the story is embedded into the gear. one of the big differences between how gear works in Nostalgaia versus many other of the Souls titles is that many items have forgotten memories, lingering memories that they can't fully remember. When you find an item like this, it will tell you a short little thing like, I recall the screams and agonies of that cold iron shackles. And then you have to find out where it's talking about. And if you go there and open your menu and look at that item, it'll be shaking if it is the white spot, and you can make it recall its memory, and you'll get a whole bunch of lore about who wielded it or what happened to it or something about the area you found it in. It'll have some kind of lore. It'll unlock a special ability. It'll actually make the weapon more beneficial skill wise, like it'll boost up the stats. So, and on top of that, after you remember so many things, you get a bonus for remembering, like having so many things that have been restored their memory, and there'll be permanent boosts to your character. There's also another type of item called Unburden, and you can do this to items as well. You'll find some that are unburdened naturally that you can't do anything to, but there's an NPC that will unburden them if you want other items unburdened. And unburdening is a different route story-wise that I didn't take, but unburdening an item takes its memory and story away, and it kind of gives it a flat like increase in stats. So I kind of compare it to like how dragon weapons were in like Dark Souls per se, you could say. At least that's my best explanation in it. But like I said, I personally didn't dwell much into that system. And just like Dark Souls, there's a gang of NPCs that are all confusing and question what the hell's really the real thing to do so you don't horrifically murder everyone. And boy, are there some bizarre interactions. This is a game that's falling apart, so that's going to lead to a few really bizarre NPCs and who's really on your side and who's really doing something else that you may not agree with. It definitely does have a lot of hidden secrets, so you're definitely going to want to run around a lot if you're going to be playing this blind like I did. You're going to really want to explore a lot. But you could also use a guide if that's your cup of tea. But the whole game motif of the world and the story is the funnest part to me. I really liked the different take on the world building. Like, I love exploring these worlds and learning about the lore and story. Like, I really like that about a lot of Souls games. And I feel like a lot of non-FromSoft titles don't usually end up in a good position when it comes to that a lot of times. But this is probably one of my favorite non-FromSoft Souls-likes in a story perspective, because it just really hits the nail really well. There's a lot of references to games, a lot of nice, interesting ideas. Like, if you're just steeped in game culture, you know a lot of game franchises and stuff, you're going to find a lot of fun, nice and interesting references and stuff of gaming culture in general. Overall, while the game doesn't really do a whole lot when it comes to the actual mechanics of a Souls-like, it does a lot of really neat ideas with the storytelling, because it doesn't go for this whole realistic world. The NPCs and stuff are well aware they're video game characters, that they're here to make a hero's journey interesting and stuff. And you'll learn that from like different NPC stories. Like one that's really interesting, in my opinion, was this vampire boss of a castle. You can find his gear. You never meet and fight him. Well, you kind of meet him, but that's a different subject. But you don't actually fight him or anything. But you find his gear, and his gear actually explains how that they acted for the hero's journey to experience and be successful and stuff. They played the role of a villain, and that was like their job. Like they do it like a ritual, but something has interrupted that whole thing, and you go along all this to figure that out. Can you save Nostalgaia and figure out what happened, what's going on, or will you just follow in the footsteps of what happened? That's your journey through Nostalgaia. That is what you are to find in Nostalgaia. As I said, at least for me, my physical build came with the DLC, The Wise of Evil. If you play on PC or get this digitally, you will have other means of needing to get that separately. This adds 2 primary areas to the base game and have several bosses in them and expand the story of essentially 3 NPCs, really. You learn of an NPC that went and retreated into the sewer that's related to what happened in Nostalgaia. You learn of an NPC that tried to run away from Nostalgaia and build a new world. And then one of the NPCs in the base game, if you dig really deep into the DLC areas, you can find something interesting. Because when you think about Nostalgaia, like you think about every NPC's role and stuff, you'll realize there's somebody missing in this game. And the Wise of Evil is technically about that. But you have to actually unlock the ability of having that character remember who they are. And it's a fun extra side thing you can do in the DLC that isn't necessarily mandatory, but I recommend doing it because it adds, again, more stuff to your limited NPCs that you have, and it just kind of fulfills the rest of the story, honestly. And I like the end dialogue of that. And there are different endings, too, just like a lot of Souls-like games usually have. And it's pretty basic, you know, you have a good and bad ending and that, so nothing too crazy. But I do resonate with the good ending, and we'll talk about that in the little spoiler section we'll have. But overall, I definitely recommend The Last Hero of Nostalgaia. You're looking for a Souls-like game, and FromSoft, you've went through all the FromSoft titles, and you want one. I mean, I admit there's not a whole lot of really good Souls-like games other than FromSoft's. There's a handful of pretty okayish ones, and then you got a lot of mediocre ones. You know who I'm talking about. But this is a pretty good one. Honestly, I really recommend it. Now, what would I recommend the price, though? This game is available on PC, Switch, PS4, and PS5 for $25 for the base game and $7.99 for the DLC. And depending on the platform you go to, there's sometimes some bundle deals where you can get for like $30 or something together with that. Now, if you want the physical version of this game, which is what I got, you're probably looking more between like $40 to $60, depending on used crib, disc, and that kind of stuff, or cartridge in the case of the Switch version. Being a limited release from Super Whale Games, they did PS5 and Switch, so at least there's a decent number. I think they're all sold out by now. I think there was some for sale still during Black Friday, but I think they're sold out. But if you want, you probably do want to double check there because it's still a better price than getting it second hand, in most cases at least. Sadly, no DRM free options. But what would I recommend the price? If you're getting it as a whole package, honestly, considering the length, time, content, and the amount of stuff you could do if you get it as a complete package, honestly, I would feel perfectly fine paying $40 for this, especially as a physical release. And Super Whale Games sold it just a little bit above $40 American, depending on your exchange, because they do euros because they're overseas. And looking that up, I do see they actually have Switch copies still in stock, so yeah, you could go down that angle if you're interested in this game for the Switch at least. But I can't speak for the performance on the Switch, though. Before we get into spoilers, did I have any interesting problems? Nothing too crazy. I did have one spot where I got stuck. Those exist in several Souls games, including FromSoft Souls games, so there is an item that you can use to teleport away, but unlike all the Souls games where you really have like a actual, like, say, like with Dark Souls, the Dark Soul, you can't get rid of it, and it's an item you can use to teleport back to like a bonfire. There is not an item that you carry on you on this. There are items that will teleport you, but they are consumable only. So there is the potential, if you were in a scenario where you used all of those, you don't have one, you got stuck. But there was only one place I had it happen, and I'm sure there'll probably are other places if you were to unpurposely do a bunch of crazy weird shit. I mean, people have found multiple of them in old Dark Souls and Bloodborne and that. So I'm sure they exist, but it's not a end of the world thing if you keep your items stocked in that. So I never had to use them other than that scenario. I never really used them, so I always had multiple of them. So if it even happened again, it wouldn't have been a problem. But it only ever happened once in one awkward area. There are a few weird interactions with a few enemies. There's some board enemies that can't be hit by ranged attacks until aggroed. Those were a little annoying because the board enemies are pretty annoying when attacking you with others. There are iron golems in one of the DLC areas whose hitbox is kinda weird when you're attacking it locked on. There's also a wall I found that you can walk through and fall out of bounds in one of the final areas of the base game that has one of those, you ever like get out of bounds and have that weird trippy effect, like it did that. It was very strange. It was me kind of wondering, probably a little too off course with my little explorative brain. I did have a visual effect of regeneration stay on me, even though the effect ended. That only happened once that I noticed. Not the end of the world kind of thing. And a few enemies where their pathing will kind of not doing what they normally did, not an end of the world kind of thing. Overall, like, the game was really pretty well together, honestly. I didn't really have any real problems with the game. Those were the most nitpicky things I could find about the game, and other than the ability of possibly getting trapped in that one spot I did in a loom, which was where the anti-hero posters were being made lore-wise. So if you can find the loom where the person who's making the anti-hero posters, there was a spot in there I got stuck in. That's the only spot I ever found like that. But overall, I really enjoyed the game. Definitely recommend. So, spoilers. So what do I have to say about the story? The story is, well, like, I really like the story because it's dependent on how you want to engage in it. You can essentially become the new villain and take it over if you want the bad ending, or you could really care about the world and the message of the game. So what's happening in the game is that former heroes have started hogging the energy, the memory of Nostalgaia, which is causing the world to fall apart. Because how the game works, how the universe of Nostalgaia works, is a hero spawns in, they experience the hero's journey, they finish the hero's journey, and then they return to Nostalgaia, and then a new hero is born, and we play the hero's journey again. Well, several heroes, instead of returning their memory to Nostalgaia, just decide to continue existing, hogging more and more the power of Nostalgaia to themselves, while the world degrades because of it. So, like, at the end of the game, once you go through all the story and shit, you're given this option to essentially sacrifice yourself and give yourself back the Nostalgaia to restore Nostalgaia, to be the hero the Nostalgaia needed. And it's like, I really understand that message a lot, because it's like, you, like, there's people who spend, like, the whole life, like, practically playing the same fucking game forever, and it's like, sometimes a game just needs to be over. You just need to let it go. You need to let those memories be memories, good memories, and let that world continue on for someone else to experience, for someone else to make that journey through. That's kind of how I took it. Because the world degraded from it just existing for so like long. Like, the characters, like, there's interesting stories with some of the NPCs. Like, several of the NPCs talk about how they remember past lives. Like, essentially, when the hero's journey began, other than a few select NPCs, like the narrator, most of the characters didn't carry memories of previous cycles. But when the heroes started just staying in Nostalgaia, holding power on that, it started causing glitches and multiple cycles layering on each other, and several NPCs became crazy or knowledgeable of things that they weren't normally knowledgeable, and they're just like, the madness of it all and shit. It's just really interesting to have this, like, whole story of what like being the NPCs, being the bosses, being the bad guys behind the scene of the game is like. It's interesting. It's a really interesting narrative angle to do for a game, and I really like that. I really appreciate that, and that's what I found charming about this game the most. While it didn't do anything crazy with the Dark Souls formula and gameplay, it did some really interesting ideas in the storytelling department. And I think that alone, mixed with Souls-like elements, makes it a worthy title for you to check out in your preferred way, be it physical or just getting it digitally. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the last hero of Nostalgaia. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you feel like you learned something interesting, please leave a like. And if you feel like you didn't learn anything, feel free to leave a dislike guilt-free. And I'd hate to really do this, but the way YouTube is being is kind of forcing me to be more like this. But if you enjoyed this content, I would really appreciate you subscribing and checking out more content. YouTube became a harder and harder place for human content creators to be more noticeable, and it was all way hard, and it's way harder now with the AI slop and crap and people stealing shit, and it just becomes way harder, and it's very appreciated. Anyway, till next time, I'll see you here at the Proving Grounds.
Soon, all the memory of Nostalgaia will be mine.